Hello and welcome to Unworthy History. Today we got some actual history for you from this book right here, Historical Sketches of Kentucky by Lewis Collins. This book was published all the way back in 1848. Now the story we're going to read today is about Daniel Boone and his first trip into Kentucky into the wilderness all the way back in 1769. The distinguished pioneer Colonel Daniel Boone, in honor of whom Boone County was named, and who was the first white man who ever made a permanent settlement within the limits of the present state of Kentucky, was born in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, on the right bank of the Delaware River, on the 11th of February, 1731. Of his life, but little is known previous to his emigration to Kentucky, with the early history of which his name is perhaps more closely identified than that of any other man. The only sources to which we can resort for information is the meager narrative dictated by himself in his old age, and which is confided principally to that period of his existence past in exploring the wilderness of Kentucky, and which therefore embraces but a comparatively small part of his life, and the desultory reminiscences of his early associates in that hazardous enterprise. This constitutes the sum total of our knowledge of the personal history of this remarkable man, to whom, as the founder of what may without impropriety be called a new empire, Greece and Rome would have erected statues of honor, if not temples of worship. It is said that the ancestors of Daniel Boone were among the original Catholic settlers of Maryland, but of this nothing is known with certainty, nor is it perhaps important that anything should be. He was eminently the architect of his own fortunes, a self-formed man in the truest sense, whose own innate energies and impulses gave the molding impress to his character. In the years of his early boyhood, his father emigrated first to Reading on the headwaters of the Schuylkill, and subsequently to one of the valleys of South Yadkin in North Carolina, where the subject of this notice continued to reside until his 40th year. Our knowledge of his history during this long interval is almost a perfect blank, and although we can well imagine that he could not have passed to this mature age without developing many of those remarkable traits by which his subsequent career was distinguished, we are in possession of no facts out of which to construct a biography of this period of his life in North Carolina. We know indeed that from his earliest years he was distinguished by a remarkable fondness for the exciting pleasures of the chase, that he took a boundless delight in the unrestrained freedom, the wild grandeur, and thrilling solitude of those vast primeval forests, where nature in her solemn majesty, unmarred by the improving hand of man, speaks to the impressionable and unhackneyed heart of the simple woodsman, in a language unknown to the dweller in the crowded haunts of men. But in this knowledge of his disposition and taste is comprised almost all that can absolutely be said to be known of Daniel Boone, from his childhood to his 40th year. In 1767, the return of Finley from his adventurous excursion into the unexplored wilds beyond the Cumberland Mountains, and the glowing accounts he gave of the richness and fertility of the new country, excited powerfully the curiosity and imaginations of the frontier backwoodsmen of Virginia and North Carolina, ever on the watch for adventures, and to whom the lonely wilderness with all its perils presented attractions which were not to be found in the close confinement and enervating inactivity of the settlements. To a man of Boone's temperament and taste, the scenes described by Finley presented charms not to be resisted, and in 1769 he left his family upon the Yadkin, and in the company with 5 others, of whom Finley was one, he started to explore that country of which he had heard so favorable an account. Having reached a stream of water on the borders of the present state of Kentucky called Red River, they built a cabin to shelter them from the inclemency of the weather, for the seasons had been very rainy, and devoted their time to the hunting and the chase, killing immense quantities of game. Nothing of particular interest occurred until December 22nd, 1769, when Boone, in company with a man named Stewart, being out hunting, they were surprised and captured by Indians. They remained with their captor 7 days until, having by a rare and powerful exertion of self-control, suffering no signs of impatience to escape them, succeeded in disarming the suspicions of the Indians. Their escape was effected without difficulty. Through life, Boone was remarkable for cool, collected self-possession in moments of most trying energy, and on no occasion was this rare and valuable quality more conspicuously displayed than during the time of this captivity. On regaining their camp, they found it dismantled and deserted. The fate of its inmates was never ascertained, and it is worthy of remark that this is the last and almost only glimpse we have of Finley, the first pioneer into Kentucky. A few days after this, they were joined by Squire Boone, a brother of the great pioneer and another man who had followed them from Carolina and accidentally stumbled onto their camp. Soon after this accession to their numbers, Daniel Boone and Stewart, in a second excursion, were again assailed by the Indians, and Stewart was shot and scalped. Boone fortunately escaped. Their only remaining companion, disheartened by the perils to which they were continually exposed, returned to North Carolina, and the two brothers were left alone in the wilderness, separated by hundreds of miles from the white settlements, and destitute of everything but their rifles. Their ammunition running short, it was determined that Squire Boone should return to Carolina for a fresh supply, while his brother remained in charge of the camp. This resolution was accordingly carried into effect, and Boone was left for a considerable time to encounter or evade the teeming perils of his hazardous solitude alone. We should suppose that his situation now would have been disheartening and wretched in the extreme. He himself says that for a few days after his brother left him, he felt dejected and lonesome, but in a short time his spirits recovered their wonted equanimity, and he roved through the woods in every direction, killing abundance of game, and finding an unutterable pleasure in the contemplation of the natural beauties of the forest scenery. On the 27th of July, 1770, the younger Boone returned from Carolina with the ammunition, and with a hardihood almost incredible, the brothers continued to range through the country without injuries until March of 1771, when they retraced their steps to North Carolina. Boone had been absent from his family for near 3 years, during nearly the whole of which time he had never tasted bread or salt, nor beheld the face of a single white man, with the exception of his brother and the friends who had been killed. So I'm going to stop there for this episode, but I'll bring you more about Daniel Boone on future episodes. So he was one of the first settlers of Kentucky, and here we heard about his first trip into that wilderness back in the late 1760s. So if you want to hear more episodes like this, then be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Unworthy History.